That was a different beast altogether. It was vast, dusty, and filled with the detritus of decades. Christmas decorations from the 70s, my old school projects, furniture covered in white sheets like ghostly figures, the whole 9 yards. I'd always avoided it, if I'm being honest. It held a certain spooky charm when I was a kid, but as an adult, it just felt like a monumental task waiting to happen. So when Mom issued her ultimatum that spring, I knew she wasn't kidding. There were boxes of my dad's old books, his collection of vinyl records, and stacks of photo albums with faded covers. It was overwhelming, to say the least. I started with one corner, sorting through things, deciding what to keep, what to donate, and what was simply beyond saving. It was slow, tedious work, and more than once I found myself getting sidetracked, lost in memories sparked by an old photograph or a forgotten trinket. The letters spoke of stolen moments, secret meetings, and a love that couldn't be. They painted a picture of a young Eleanor that I'd never known, a woman with a passionate heart and a hidden life. I felt a strange mix of shock and fascination as I read through them, piecing together a story that had been buried in the attic for decades. It was about uncovering the truth about my mother's life, about the woman I thought I knew so well. I started to look at Mom differently. Her occasional moods, her moments of quiet sadness that I'd always attributed to missing my father, now seemed to have a different context. Was she still carrying the weight of this secret love after all these years? The physical work of cleaning out the attic was exhausting, but the emotional weight of what I was discovering was even heavier. I spent hours sorting through boxes, my mind racing with questions. Who was this man? Why had their relationship ended? And why had my mother kept all these things hidden away for so long? One afternoon, as I was taking a break from the dusty work, I decided to do a little online research. I typed the name on the letters into a search engine, hoping to find some clue about who he was. After a few tries, I stumbled upon a local historical society's website. There, in a list of prominent families from our town's past, was the name, along with a brief biography and a photograph. The man in the picture was handsome, with a kind smile and eyes that held a hint of sadness. His name was Daniel, and he had been a well-respected doctor in town. The biography mentioned that he had married someone else and had a family. It didn't say anything about a relationship with my mother. I felt a pang of disappointment. My mom seemed pleased with my progress, though she never asked about what I was finding up there. It was as if the attic and its contents were a closed chapter in her life, one she didn't want to revisit. But I couldn't let it go. The letters, the photographs, the locket, they were all pieces of a puzzle that I felt compelled to solve. One evening, after dinner, I decided to take a chance. I gathered a few of the letters and the photograph of Daniel and went to find my mother in the living room. She was sitting in her favorite armchair, knitting, her brow furrowed in concentration. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to broach the subject. "Mom," I began, my voice a little shaky, "I found something in the attic." She looked up, her expression guarded. "Oh? What's that, dear?" I held out the letters and the photograph. "These. I found these letters and this picture." Her eyes widened as she took them, her knitting falling forgotten into her lap. Her face, usually so composed, paled visibly. She looked down at the letters, her hands trembling slightly. A long silence hung in the air, broken only by the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Finally, Mom looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and something else, perhaps relief. "Where did you find these, Clara?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. "In an old wooden box tucked away in the corner," I replied. "Who is he, Mom? Daniel?" She nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path down her wrinkled cheek. "Yes, that was a long time ago." I sat down on the sofa opposite her, waiting for her to continue. She took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength to tell a story she had kept hidden for decades. "Daniel and we were very close," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "It was before I met your father. We were young and we fell in love, but it wasn't meant to be." She went on to explain that Daniel came from a wealthy family, and his parents had disapproved of their relationship. They had pressured him to marry someone else, someone who they felt was more suitable. Heartbroken, Eleanor had eventually met my father, and they had built a life together. "Your father was a good man, Clara," she said, her voice firm. "I loved him very much. But Daniel, that was a different kind of love. A youthful, passionate love that stays with you, even after all these years." She told me about their secret meetings, their stolen moments, and the pain of having to say goodbye. She had kept the letters and mementos as a reminder of that time, a secret part of her past that she had never felt able to share. As she spoke, I felt a wave of understanding wash over me. So many things about my mother's personality, her occasional wistful looks, her love for certain old songs, they all made sense now. She wasn't just missing my father, she was also carrying the memory of this lost love. "Why didn't you ever tell me, Mom?" I asked gently. She sighed. "It was a long time ago, Clara. I didn't see the point in bringing it up. Your father never knew, and it just felt like something that belonged in the past." "But it's a part of your life," I said. "A big part, it seems." She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "Yes, it was. But I made my choices and I don't regret them. Your father gave me a good life, and I wouldn't trade you for anything." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of her confession hanging in the air. I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you for telling me, Mom," I said. "I understand." She squeezed my hand back, a small smile gracing her lips. "It feels good to finally talk about it." The rest of the summer was spent finishing the attic renovation, but now it felt different. It wasn't just a chore anymore. It was a connection to my mother's past, a way for me to understand her better. As I worked, I would often think about young Eleanor and her secret love, imagining the emotions she must have felt. By the end of August, the attic was completely transformed. The dusty space had been cleaned, painted, and furnished with comfortable chairs and bookshelves. It was now a bright and inviting room, a far cry from the cluttered storage space it had once been. My mom came up to see the finished result, her eyes widening in surprise. "It looks wonderful, Clara," she said, a genuine smile on her face. "You've done a fantastic job." "Thanks, Mom," I replied, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "I thought it could be a nice space for us to relax in." She nodded, looking around the room. "It is perfect." But the renovation of the attic had done more than just create a new room in the house. It had also opened up a new chapter in our relationship, a deeper understanding between mother and daughter. The secret that had been hidden away for so long had finally been brought into the light, and in doing so, it had brought us closer together. As the summer drew to a close, I knew that I wouldn't be moving out, not because of Mom's ultimatum, but because I realized that this was where I belonged. With her, in our old family home, filled with its secrets and stories. And now, I was a part of those stories in a way I never had been before. A few weeks after our conversation about Daniel, Mom and I were having tea in the newly renovated attic. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. Mom was looking through some of the old photo albums I had salvaged, a soft smile playing on her lips. "You know," she said without looking up, "Daniel and I almost ran away together." My teacup clattered slightly as I set it down. "What? You never told me that." She finally looked up, her eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. "It was a long time ago, dear. A youthful indiscretion, perhaps." "But you were serious?" I pressed, intrigued. "Oh, yes," she replied. "We had it all planned. We were going to leave town, start a new life somewhere where no one knew us. But at the last minute, I couldn't go through with it." "Why not?" she sighed, her smile fading. "His family. They had so much influence. They threatened to ruin him, his career, everything. And I didn't want to be the reason for that." "So you stayed?" "I stayed. And he did what his family wanted him to do. We never saw each other again after that." A wave of sadness washed over me for the young Eleanor, forced to give up her love for the sake of societal pressure. It made her seem more human, more vulnerable than I had ever imagined. "Did you ever regret it?" I asked softly. She looked around the cozy attic, her gaze lingering on a framed photograph of my father. "I had a good life with your father, Clara. A different kind of love, perhaps, but a good one. And I have you. No, I don't think I regret it. But sometimes I wonder what might have been." As she said those words, my eyes fell on a small, intricately carved wooden box that I had placed on one of the bookshelves. I hadn't really examined it closely when I found it in the attic, assuming it was just another piece of forgotten trinket. But now, something about it caught my attention. "Mom, what's this?" I asked, picking up the box and handing it to her. She took it, her brow furrowing in confusion. "I don't remember this. Where did you find it?" "It was tucked away in the back of one of the old wardrobes," I replied. Mom turned the box over in her hands, examining it closely. It was made of dark wood, with delicate carvings of flowers and leaves. There was a small, tarnished brass clasp on the front. With trembling fingers, she unclasped it and slowly lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single folded piece of paper. She carefully unfolded it, her eyes scanning the handwritten lines. As she read, her face slowly drained of color. Her breath hitched and she let out a small gasp. "What is it, Mom?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. It's a letter from Daniel." "Another letter?" She nodded, her hand shaking as she held out the paper. "But this one is dated just a few weeks before your father and I got married." I took the letter, my fingers trembling as I unfolded it. The handwriting was the same as the others, but the tone was different, more urgent, more desperate. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. "I know this is last minute, but I couldn't let you go without one final plea. I know your wedding is fast approaching, and perhaps I have no right to ask this of you. But I can't bear the thought of you marrying another man, of losing you forever. I know my family has made things difficult for us, but I have found a way. I have secured a position at a hospital in another state, far away from their influence. We can leave together, start fresh, just as we always dreamed. Please, my love, meet me at the old oak tree by the river on the night before your wedding. If you come, it will mean you still feel something for me, that our love is worth fighting for. I will wait for you there, my heart in my hands. Forever yours, Daniel." I stared at the letter, my mind reeling. My mother had been faced with a choice, a real, tangible opportunity to run away with the man she truly loved, and she had chosen to stay. "Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "you never told me about this." Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "I couldn't, Clara. It was too painful to think about. I went to the tree that night. I waited for hours, but he never came." "He never came?" She nodded, her voice choked with emotion. I thought he had changed his mind. That he had decided to stay and do what his family wanted. I was heartbroken." "But he wrote this letter," I said, pointing to the date. "He was there, waiting for you." A look of confusion crossed her face. "But I waited until dawn. He never showed." Suddenly a thought struck me. "Mom, did anyone else know about your plans to meet Daniel?" She hesitated for a moment, then her eyes widened in realization. "My mother. She always disapproved of Daniel. She thought he wasn't good enough for me." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. My grandmother, wanting what she thought was best for her daughter, had likely intercepted Daniel's letter, preventing my mother from ever receiving it. She had stolen their last chance at happiness. A wave of anger washed over me, directed at a grandmother I had never even met. How could she have done that? How could she have interfered so drastically in my mother's life? Mom was still crying, the letter clutched tightly in her hand. I put my arm around her, pulling her close. "Oh, Mom," I said, feeling her pain as if it were my own. "I'm so sorry." We sat there for a long time, just holding each other, the weight of the past hanging heavy in the air. The attic, once just a dusty storage space, had now become a repository of long-held secrets and unspoken emotions. In the days that followed, Mom and I talked more openly than we ever had before. She shared more memories of Daniel, of their time together, and of the pain of their separation. It was as if finding that last letter had finally given her permission to fully acknowledge that part of her life. I did some more research online and discovered that Daniel had indeed moved away and had a successful career. He had passed away a few years prior, never knowing that Eleanor had waited for him that night by the river. The revelation was bittersweet. There was a sadness in knowing what might have been, but also a sense of peace in finally understanding the truth. Mom and I had both gained a deeper understanding of each other, our bond strengthened by the shared discovery of this long-lost secret. The attic remained our favorite room in the house. We often went up there to read, to talk, or just to sit in comfortable silence, surrounded by the echoes of the past. The renovation had not only transformed the space, but had also transformed our relationship. One afternoon, I was scrolling through old family photos on my phone and came across a picture of my grandmother, a stern-looking woman with a tight smile. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for the choices she had made, the way she had tried to control my mother's life. I decided to post the picture on my private Instagram account with a simple caption. "Found this old photo. Sometimes, even with the best intentions, the choices we make can have unforeseen consequences. Sa san sama and sanai's tea." A few days later, I received a message from a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "Clara, is that a picture of Great Aunt Margaret?" she wrote. "I remember her telling me a story once about how she had to protect your mother from a young man who wasn't good enough for her. I never really understood what she meant until now." It seemed that the secret of Daniel and Eleanor had rippled through the family in its own way, leaving behind whispers and unanswered questions. Now, with the discovery of the letter, the truth was finally coming to light. Life with Mom settled into a new rhythm. There was a greater sense of openness between us, a willingness to talk about things we had previously kept hidden. The attic, once a symbol of forgotten memories, had become a place of connection and understanding. One evening, as we were watching television together, Mom turned to me with a thoughtful expression on her face. "You know, Clara," she said, "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time I finally let go of some of these things. The letters, the photographs, they've held a lot of memories, both happy and sad. But maybe it's time to make room for new ones." I smiled and took her hand. "Whatever you want to do, Mom. We can do it together." And so, we spent an afternoon in the attic, carefully going through the remaining letters and mementos. We shared stories and memories, laughing and crying together. In the end, Mom decided to keep a few of the photographs and the locket, placing them in a small keepsake box. The rest of the letters, the ones filled with the longing and heartache of a love that never fully blossomed, we decided to let go of. We held a small private ceremony in the backyard, burning the letters and watching the ashes float away on the breeze. It felt like a symbolic release, a way for Mom to finally close that chapter of her life.